welcome to my podcast. Today's story, the Villisca Axe Murder House in Iowa. The story begins like this. 8 people were murdered in their beds the very early morning hours of June 11th, 1912, sometime between midnight and 5 a.m. 8 people were bludgeoned to death within the house of the Moore family. The weapon, an axe. All 6 family members and 2 friends of one of the daughters, and 6 of them were children. On the night of June 10th, mere hours before the killings, the family had gone to church, which had ended at 9:30 p.m. They arrived back home around 9:45 or 10. Cigarette butts in the attic led investigators to believe that the killer had snuck into the attic while the family was out and hid there until they fell asleep. Now, the Moore family was like most families in Villisca. They didn't lock their doors when they went to church. The parents, Josiah and Sarah Moore, were the first 2 victims. The killer only used the blade of the weapon on Josiah, who received the most brutal beating. The rest of the victims were murdered with the blunt side of the axe, which happened to be Josiah's. The family friends who were staying in the guest room, Ina Mae Stillinger, who was 8, and Lena Gertrude Stillinger, who was 12, were the last to be killed. All of the victims, except Lena, appeared to have been asleep when they died. Lena was the only one who had defensive wounds, and she was lying across the bed that she was on. The axe, which had been used to kill all 8, had been left in the guest room, next to this big 4-pound piece of bacon, which at some point the killer had covered all of the mirrors in the house with blankets and clothes, and for some odd reason cooked himself a plate of food, which he then did not eat but left it in the kitchen. He also left a bloody bowl of water, which this story, there is something very hauntingly intriguing about little details like this unsolved murders. These killings were discovered the next morning when Mary Peckham, the neighbor of the Moores, noticed that the family hadn't started their morning chores around 7 a.m. She called Rushmore, Josiah's brother, who let himself in with his copy of the house key. And after discovering the bodies of the Stillingers, he called the local police officer, who called in investigators. With multiple subjects, the murders was never solved. One suspect, Reverend George Kelly, was actually tried for the murders. Kelly was a traveling minister who was in town the night of the crime. He was at the service the Moore family attended before their deaths, but inexplicably left town between 5 and 5:30 a.m. The next morning, he showed a suspicious interest in the murders, though, and after being in and out of trouble with the law for sending obscene material through the mail and a stint in a mental hospital, he was arrested for the murders in 1917. He confessed, then recanted, and was eventually tried and acquitted. It seemed that most people didn't believe that he was mentally or physically capable of the murders. That is all we have time for today. If you liked, please remember to subscribe to my podcast. And I will see you next time. Wait a minute. No, I won't. This is a podcast.